Chancellor Sunak's announcement yesterday to launch a task force for central bank digital currency highlights really what's the backdrop of a lot of work from central banks globally to look at this topic of a digital currency. The pound sterling being one of the strongest currencies globally is an obvious place to start from for what's called a stable coin, or a currency that's linked to one of the national fiat currencies like the pound sterling.
There has been a lot of chatter in other central banks. Which ones do you think are making particular strides here?
Actually, China is one of them. There was a really interesting study by PwC that came out this month that highlights the work of about 60 central banks around the world. The UK, according to this study, is the top country looking at this within Europe, but not the world. Within Europe, I think there are a lot of potentially more conservative governments across the West. Given that they already have very strong central currencies, there's probably less of a push to explore this, but we're very excited to be in the UK and in a jurisdiction which is forward-looking in this particular sector.
But let's talk about risks. I mean, do digital currencies really reduce financial stability risks, or have central banks really jumped on the bandwagon because you've got companies, big tech firms like Amazon and Facebook talking about having their own digital currencies?
I think it's a really interesting distinction between what companies are doing and what the central banks are doing. Here, the Bank of England is a very different animal, I would say, to the likes of Amazon. What we're talking about here is the capacity to reduce a lot of costs in the system in terms of counterparty risk. Here, for example, making a payment overseas, there's often a period of several days before that payment actually arrives. If the plumbing of that payment transfer process is digitized, and that's underwritten by a central bank, there's much less risk in terms of understanding, is that money actually there, and will that money actually arrive? And so you can potentially transform settlement times from days to a matter of seconds, which would reduce a lot of risk in the system and create a much more efficient payment process.
Would a digital version of sterling replace physical cash and bank accounts?
I think that's a broader question. It's something people have been discussing a lot recently. There are issues, I think, in terms of privacy, potentially if cash were to disappear. And there are reasons to consider that as an important feature of an economy. I think in terms of digital and what's happening in terms of this potential Britcoin, as you called it, is a different animal, again, to what's happening with digitization of payment rails overall. And here we see e-money growing quite a bit in importance, and the percentage of cash being used decreasing. But a fully digitized pound sterling, for example, is a very different machine in the back end, because it means that the underlying principles for how that transaction or that currency is recorded are done potentially in a public capacity using a public blockchain or private. It's not yet determined, as this is still in consultation.